What's up? What's up, everybody? Welcome to the CorridorCast.
The CorridorCast.
Jake just stopped playing his banjo for intros, which is
Dude, I stopped playing the banjo ages ago. You know why?
Because
it was a little.
No,
wait,
sorry.
what were you going to say?
Nothing.
What were you going to say?
I was doing it because I don't know. Because your taste improved. I don't know. The banjo is a delightful instrument. I actually quite like it. It's like the double pedals of guitars.
The banjo is like when it's not in the right setting, you know, when you bring it into a podcast setting, it's kind of like a bull in a china shop. Right. You know, it's just right. Kind of everywhere, and it's wreaking havoc. Which is why I would only just play a couple chords, but it does sort of grab your attention. But I don't know if it grabs yours. I don't know if it grabs your attention in a way that is conducive to, you know, like an audio experience.
Yeah.
When you've come to a podcast.
Perhaps. I don't know. I found it delightful.
Okay.
Look, I like my hot sauce.
I can always bring it back.
Yeah. Bring it back, please. Direct request right here.
I like
from
it.
A person sitting on this other side of the screen from you.
Guys, if Niko wants it, you know,
Niko get what Niko
wants.
He just pulls it into frame.
Materializes. It's downstairs. I do have my guitar over there, but
okay, next podcast, I guess.
Yeah, I can. Let me restring it. It needs to be restrung. I have the strings. They're
you
right
get it all
here.
Nice and presentable, and you show me that banjo, Jake.
Okay, and it'll just be a little.
Yeah. So I have a inspiration question for you guys.
Ooh.
So making a lot of YouTube videos. I've been doing it for 14 years, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
A long time.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's a thing that we always say, especially on Visual Effects Artist React, which is, you know, it needs to serve the story. It's like, I had this crazy idea for a movie and we came up with a way to pull it off, and that required us to invent this new magic trick. And we're like, wow, it's always such a cool magic trick when that happens. Right? Mm-hmm. It needs to serve the story. But when I look back at the videos that we've done on Corridor and like various shorts and things that I've actually said in our videos, a lot of our videos come from having an effect we want to try, and then we write a story for that effect. Now, is that a backwards way to be going about doing this? Because we've had some pretty solid results of going in that direction. Like, it's been an inspiration that's led us to do some cool things. Is that saying of the VFX need to be made for the story? Is that really a true saying? Or in reality, can you have a cool VFX technique that you then write a story around and have a good story from that?
Well, I feel like it's the prompt that then leads you to do this, write the story, but then the story becomes the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
It's because like creativity, there's no limitations. You could do anything, but once you have an effect that you want to achieve, you go, oh, okay, maybe we can narrow down the window of stories we want to tell. I think that's like kind of how James Cameron goes about writing movies. Is he's like, he has a cool scene in mind, and then he's like, okay, what would be the story around this? But then he starts going on that, and then he's like, okay, now I have my story. And sometimes that cool action scene might not make it in, but it's just like the jumping off point, I feel like.
Because there's a fair amount of like movies and TV shows out there that have a story and a visual idea that go hand in hand, and like the story wouldn't exist the way it does without the visual idea. Like, you know, like Birdman being a one-take movie.
Yeah.
Like that, if the one take was irrelevant to the quality of the Birdman story, they wouldn't have done it. Like, it needs that cinematic trick to be paired with the story to make that movie what it is, you know? So, I don't know.
Yeah,
what do you think, Jake?
It's, of course, it depends on the story, I think. I think the reason why people maybe initially turned off to this like approach of coming up with a visual style and then telling a story with it is maybe because it doesn't work as often.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know why that is. Perhaps it's just simply the scale that most television shows and movies operate at. That wouldn't really be how you would go about it, you know? Like, imagine if you were like, hey, so imagine if you're the first person to like discover a first person camera rig, and you were like, oh, this is dope. We gotta film something with this. But then instead of going out and shooting like a viral video or like Superman with a GoPro, which is what we did with it, you go out and you're like, let's do a movie. I mean, they kind of did this. It was called Hardcore Henry.
Dude, that movie's sick.
Yeah,
That movie's
But
awesome.
that movie's sick. Okay, so then my theory fails. My theory totally fails.
Yeah, because that's the problem.
I'm
I've been
trying
thinking about
to
this.
think about it. I'm trying to reverse engineer it, the psychology of it.
Yeah, because the more I think about it, the more it's like, there's some great pieces of cinema that start because somebody's like, hey, I can do a cool effect. And everyone's like, well, what's a good story that uses that effect? It's like, this maybe. And they're like, oh, yeah. And then it comes out and everyone's like, dang, this is groundbreaking. Like, yeah, it just seems like that maybe that saying of story first is like we just take for granted. Maybe it's not quite this.
I feel like you're getting at it, which is that film is a visual art form. And like, if you just have a great story you want to tell, you could probably just write that.
You're right, yeah.
But if there's like spectacle is baked in with the story, like it's all part of why we engage with film and animation is because we also want to we want to like experience a story that takes us places and has us meet people that we've never met before. But we also want to like literally see things we've never seen before. That like the novelty of it is still super important.
Okay, I've got another theory. I'm sorry. Maybe it's because that's not how we approach things in real life. You can do it in the art form. You can go, hey, I've got this idea of, we're going to come up with a story to fit this visual style that's groundbreaking. And then overall, the whole thing will be groundbreaking. But in real life, when we're trying to solve a human problem, it's always the other way, which is here's our story. We're bumping along, we're arguing along the way. And then we get to a problem and we're like, shoot, what do? We got to come up with a solution. And we're like, let's build a dam and we'll create hydroelectric power. Okay, good idea. All right. Well, and it's like, it works more in practice that way. I don't know. I'm just trying to think of the psychology behind it.
In real life, you're right. The solutions do follow the problems generally in that order. Whereas in movies, sometimes they're the other way around. I mean, part of why I'm asking this is because, by the time this podcast comes out, the Starfield video will have come out. And the Starfield video is interesting because it initially started as this experiment to see how much further across the uncanny valley we could get compared to like our previous experiences and kind of like what's been done out there, especially like the indie creator level. And we were putting together some various like ideas because, I've been messing with this Pixie face morph stuff. Unreal Engine had just announced, or not announced, they had just released, new face motion capture tools. We had the new Rococo suit in, so we had all these new tools in front of us, everything that, from face rendering to motion capture to all this sorts of stuff.
It was
it's
Sam's dreamland.
Right. Sam's dreamland. And it's like, well, let's come back to this thing. And like, doing faces is incredible. Like not just faces, doing human characters and CGI is very difficult. As we have said a billion times before. So we're putting all these pieces together and we're working on this project. And in the middle of this project is this Starfield short that we didn't have that short when we started this project, right? It was, hey, let's come up with something that uses CGI people. In fact, I think the first idea was a parody on The Sixth Sense where there's a kid who can see fake people. And then the person he's been talking to has been fake the whole time and doesn't know it. And just like, with Bruce Willis, everybody's seen
Is that the green screen man concept?
I don't know. Yes.
Where everything is done
it's
by
a very
green
deep cut VFX joke though. And it's also a Sixth Sense joke, which is not exactly timely. Anyways, so we didn't do that idea. That idea never got realized. But this Starfield idea popped up because Sam's like, well, it's so easy to make that stuff in Unreal Engine. Like there's a billion kits out there of like these different things. And like Kit Bash just, hooked us up with some new stuff as well. And they have an amazing sci-fi universe that you can build. And he and Jordan Allen did this, like basically this improv skit about just, it's the end of the world, the final battle. And the main character has no idea what's going on because he doesn't care. He's just been following waypoints and objective markers. And like, the other person who's in this world reacts to that as one should when the other person has not been paying attention. And they did this little skit and like turned into this really charming short. And while we were working on this project at the beginning, I distinctly remember Sam saying, it's like, we can't just we can't just use the tech for the sake of using the tech. We can't just make a short about the tech. We need to do what we say we're always going to do and have a creative idea that we want to execute. And then we've solved the problems that we need in order to be able to execute on that creative idea. And that's where the tech comes in. And it's like, yeah, but now I look back in this process and that's not at all what actually happened. What actually happened was we started playing with tech and then went, what's a cool story we can write using all this tech? And then we got a really cool thing out of it. So it's weird. It feels like it's been backwards, but at the same time, the results have been delightful for the most part. Every time we've done it that way.
You look at, especially the Corridor videos, and there's no bright line rule. I mean, even the Assassin's Creed 3 video that we did, like, I don't know how many years ago it was, 10 years ago. Mm-hmm. That was a brand integration. And so the reason why we came up with that initially was they said, hey, we want you guys to come up with a story in the Assassin's Creed universe. Mm-hmm. So it's not like we went to them and pitched them because we had this great story about a character or characters in the Assassin's Creed universe and we wanted to tell it. They came to us and said, hey, would you want to tell a story in the universe? And then we came up with it that way. So, but it didn't hurt it. That video did great. Mm-hmm. It's got like 15 million views or whatever. And it was really fun to make. And
yeah, it's one of our best videos.
I think it's what you have to decide, like what you think is backwards. Like, is it backwards just because we have the tech at our disposal and then we create based off of what we have versus let's create something and then figure out how to do it? Like, some people might think that's a backwards way of doing it because it's like, oh, you might go over budget and you have to go, well, now we're climbing this different ladder when really maybe we're doing it right this whole time. I don't know. If we have it, and it's like a lot of it is sometimes on the cheaper side or given to us or used for experimental purposes, and then you create something so beautiful out of it. It's like, is it backwards or is it just a really cool way of doing things?
Yeah. I mean, I definitely find that constraints big creativity, like more so than anything else. Like every time we have a brand say like, hey, make a video about this. And we're like, oh, how do we come up with a cool video?
It's like, until there's just too many. Okay. And then you get to the breaking point and then you're just like, no, I'm not doing this. I'm not doing this. I can't.
But do you think the same thing happens when you have a story and then you have to change your story because you can't do something because you don't have the tech,
right?
Rather than getting in front of it to begin with, and then you build something around what you know that you do have.
There's some. Yeah. I think there is something that does happen when you have an approach. You have a stylistic approach that doesn't necessarily happen when you have an idea, and that is the ability to really precisely tailor the idea to fit the stylistic approach. And sometimes when you have an idea and you're trying to come up with a stylistic approach to fit that idea, that process can be very messy. A lot of, tests, experiments, research and development, to try to sort of like bring everything that's possible into this particular vision. But when you have it the other way, it does allow you to be very precise about story, because you can go, well, we know what it looks like, so we just need to write within those confines. And I think that can lend itself towards less messiness when you're coming up with an idea. I mean, I'll give you an example. When we were doing that Black Rifle Coffee like action scene in the Bass Pro Shop, we did this thing where there was this big fight in a Bass Pro Shop. It was super fun. But one of the conditions of the story, like one of the precepts of why they were in this store to begin with, was that it was a Black Friday sale and there was a bunch of people standing outside of a Bass Pro Shop, and then a riot breaks out because it's Black Friday, and then they got to go and they got to steal the coffee and get out of there. And so it was like, it all made sense. Like, why did a fight break out in the middle of a department store? Well, there was a riot because people were standing outside for Black Friday.
Yeah, everyone's going crazy for the products, and
yeah, everyone was going crazy for the product. So it all made sense in this little, in the like 2 shots you have to give the backstory in a 60-second bit. But then the location came along and said, "Oh, well, we can't have any like give any notion that there's a riot in our stores." And so we kind of like casually took the note and said, "Oh, well, we'll come up with something." But the entire idea rested on this like sort of setting. And so we recontextualized it. It wasn't as good though, because it didn't have as much impact, I think, from like the start. And had it been one of those situations where we had a visual style that we were trying to achieve, then it probably would have never been a problem. A problem like that probably would have never arisen in the first place, because we would have been writing for the execution of the visual and not for a story idea that we had.
Mhm.
And then sort of fitting the tools that we had available to that.
Yeah. I don't know. I feel like I always get the best inspiration when I have like a challenge or a new technique in front of me and it's something to pursue.
Yeah.
That's something that's very unique about filmmaking in that way, because it's like if you paint with oil paints, it's not like, oh, they just came out with a new oil paint, dude. Like,
they got the new hue of blue. Oh, I'm gonna paint this peacock.
Dude, but even then, like I think people who do the manual arts, illustration, all that stuff, there'll be some kind of challenge, because you can draw anything, but like you need some limitation, some narrowing of what you can do creatively to actually like make something come alive, or to like find the idea. Because I like the idea that like the perfect version of the idea exists out there somewhere, and you're like trying to find it. And if you're starting with no, sort of like narrowing lens of your vision, it's really hard to find it. But if you start to kind of like narrow down your search field, you can kind of spot the idea. And there's, an unlimited amount of quote perfect ideas, but like you have to find the specific one.
It's the same way in music too. A lot of times, I mean, sometimes you get a song in your head and you just have to write the song out. But other times you'll be learning guitar or piano. We were just talking about this before we started the podcast. You learn a technique of playing, and then all of a sudden it opens a whole new element, or a whole new realm of possibility.
Yeah.
Of types of songs you can now do because you learned a new technique. And from that, now it's just like, oh, well, now you added another superpower to your ability.
Yeah. And that's, again, with filmmaking, like it's hard, like it's interesting, like we call filmmaking art form the same way we would call drawing or something, but like filmmaking is so many art forms like compiled into one. So there's so many like I don't know, like skill trees that you can invest in with filmmaking, like just on the visual side. In the VFX world, like we specialize in like specific things with CG and visual effects, but like there's cameras, there's freaking, lenses that go on those cameras, and there's like people who specialize in the most specific like versions of those
the stop motion guy. Like, who's the stop motion guy out there? Who's like, that's the guy that does all the stop motion shorts that just slap. That's the guy. There's a guy, and he's doing it right now.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So, yeah. I don't know.
Yeah,
man.
well, I guess that answers that question.
I guess it's about being open to what you have available. I think that's almost more important always. That's gotten us through more times than either of the specific approaches.
You're right. That's the best constraint, is you just look around and be like, what do I have that I could shoot with right now? Can I write a story
right
that
now.
includes that?
Yeah.
Right now.
Yeah.
Mhm.
That's what dictates our weekly videos to almost every extent. Like, because we brainstorm every week, we write down ideas. Then every Monday it's like, okay, well, what can we shoot right right now? What can we shoot
Mhm.
this week?
Yeah.
Right now. And you look at your list, like, well, I can shoot this. It's like, all right, that's the one. You know?
And you can say that on the biggest budget movie films too. It's like you could have this idea, but the day of and it's cloudy. It's like practically, what can we do? Do we move it, or do we do this? Or, or do we use a drone, or do we get it? It comes down to what can we do practically, no matter if it's a YouTube video or if it's going to be in a movie theater.
Yeah.
They would never risk being subjected to the winds of weather. They'll create their own weather.
Maybe.
And we
Create
were,
their own light.
so we filmed an episode of React today, and somehow the whole episode just ended up being us looking at effect shots of what basically just ends up being the actor's face cut out and put onto a CG shot. Whether it's Marvel or de-aging or just straight up the visual effects that they're doing. Like, it's every single thing we looked at ended up being a cutout face on a CG body. Little Mermaid was one of the things I looked at. And like, I like the notion of an actor has like gotten really deconstructed for me in a weird way now. And it makes me wonder where it's going, because you have these personalities that are, IPs, brands. They are characters, right? Like Brad Pitt. There is a human being named Brad Pitt, but more specifically, there's a creature named Brad Pitt that is the collective point of everybody's like charisma perception, creating this being that they think should exist named Brad Pitt.
Yeah.
And like, that's a different entity than the actual man. Like, it's
But
this
most
character.
perfectly visualized in the Legends of the Fall, obviously.
Right, exactly.
What's that, dude? Is that a Brad Pitt movie?
Yeah,
oh,
man.
dude, that's like young, long hair Brad.
Oh man, Jake's favorite.
Yeah, everyone's favorite Brad. Like
1994.
anyway.
Oh, that's early Brad.
Yeah.
What was his first one? It was like that.
Well, hold on, guys. This isn't a Brad Pitt fan
Tangent.
podcast. I am going somewhere with this.
Sorry, we're just so in love with Brad Pitt.
No, I know.
that
I
we-
get it. Well, exactly, right? It's that face. It's that face that they will film and then cut out and put an entire CG world and body around.
Right.
And it's just like I was asking these questions like, why? Why are we like doing all why are they doing all this work and filming all this just to cut out a little oval shaped patch in the center of it
Yeah.
to then replace everything else?
That's how I've always felt about the Marvel movies. Is like, I've really started thinking about this recently. Is like superhero movies are much better suited for animation.
Yeah.
And they are essentially animated films, but because of the fact that they have to put Robert Downey Jr.'s face in these movies, all the CG has to look real. But like,
Right.
imagine, like, you just don't have Robert Downey Jr. Now it can look like Spider-Verse,
Yeah.
and it can be the perfect version of it because, we're all big anime fans. Like, anime is an adaptation of Japanese comic books,
Mhm.
and it's a direct adaptation. Like the shows
Panel to the shot. Yeah.
the shows have the style of those books. And our adaptations of our collective comic book mythology is like a bunch of people in these like kind of realistic versions of it, but it still looks goofy.
Yeah.
It's not, again, we're talking about looking for the perfect idea. I feel like that way of doing it, unless it's like,
There's a brief moment where like you had like 300 and
Yeah.
Sin City, like the Frank Miller adaptations, where like
yeah,
American comic books are getting their like cinematic style, and then they like it just fell out.
Yeah.
and like
Well,
Marvel
it's
took
funny.
over.
You're absolutely right about that, because I was at my buddy's place this weekend, and his kid had a painting, like one of those non-painting paintings that you can get online
Mhm.
of Iron Man.
oh yeah,
in his
yeah.
it was like a painting of Iron Man, like looking all stoic and cool. And I stopped and I thought about that for a second, and just about the cultural significance of this 16-year-old having a painting of Iron Man in his room, and it was a little bizarre, but I totally get why that's the coolest thing ever to him. Because
Yeah, and I feel like that first Iron Man movie, like those first couple Marvel movies, it makes sense for it to be live action. It makes sense for it not to be an animated film because, like, for the most part, the stakes are kind of real in terms of like the human characters.
Mhm.
Like, if this guy falls, he could hurt himself,
Right.
Like in the most basic way.
Yeah.
But now these movies, like, it'll be like, oh, the bad guy's coming, and all their costumes just start like melting over their skin, and they're like, we're ready to go, and it's like has become a complete Saturday morning cartoon.
Yeah,
and just make it a cartoon then, and then we won't. The stakes will make sense.
It's like the little oval of face that you're saving, in the
and then you could go
screen.
even more grandiose with the events. Even more, you know, they could be fighting in space for literally the entire time.
Well, and it's interesting how in a cartoon that it sort of like makes more sense sometimes, because this is kind of in the weeds, but they have this new Star Wars show called Ahsoka, and Ahsoka is a character from the animated show, and in the show, spoiler alert, they have a flashback. So in the show that she's originally from, it's called The Clone Wars. She is like, I guess like 14 years old. But when you're watching the show, it's an animated show. So this kid running around in like a war zone is like, it's cute and fun because it's like she's bouncy.
Adventure.
Yeah,
she's bouncy.
Yeah, you know, she's like, it's a cartoon. But so they have the flashback in this live action series. And now because of the medium, you look at it and you're like, wait a second, she's like a child soldier, and this is like this is really dark. And it's like because they light it in a way, it looks like a Vietnam movie, and like Anakin's like, "Come on, Ahsoka," and it's like, why did you take this 14-year-old into like combat scenarios? And she's like supposed to be the commander of this army. And
why is the Viet Cong arming her with an AK-47? What's going on here?
And I feel like that with a lot of these Marvel movies where it's like, I didn't see the new Ant-Man, but they brought out, do you guys know who MODOK is in the Marvel comics? He's like basically, people might know this reference from Spy Kids, like George Lopez's character is like in this head in a jar. It's like it's a giant like tech screen with arms and legs, and he's just a giant head. That's MODOK in the comics. And again, as an illustration, that's a cool idea. As a live action thing, it looks like ass, you know?
Yeah.
And there's this, it's an uncanny area that we're in with these superhero movies and with all big budget blockbusters, because like I'm sure the Transformers movies or whatever, you know, big budget thing is the same thing where it's like, here's a giant CG battle scene, and then here's this guy's face, like kind of in there somewhere. On top of the CG.
I mean, that's basically Avatar. Yeah. So, you know, I started posing that question because like I'm trying to get into like the psychological underpinnings of it, like these weird human nature things. And, you know, Sam and Jordan answered, of course, well, human faces are really hard to do. So might as well just film a real human face. We can do everything else, right? But when you're looking at a shot and it's a close-up of a person, currently everybody almost always fails at doing CG faces, especially when they're a close-up. So you might as well just film a real face and work backwards from there. It's like, okay, sure. You know, it makes sense to me at first. But then part of me pauses and be like, once again, animated movies are popular. Why do we really just need that little circle of a face outside of like, you know, well, it's hard to do it in CG. It's like, sure. But what if it's just slightly stylized? Why do we need Robert Downey Jr.'s face?
Yeah.
Like as pixels. That's pixel
because
data
we've got to have contracts, Niko. We've got to have the contracts.
I think it comes down to this, and it's that we fall in love with people, and that's what we've always been obsessed with celebrities and obsessed with people. And Gal Gadot, is it going to be the same without Gal Gadot? Is it going to be the same without Paul Rudd? It's just like, I don't know, man. Well, maybe, but I don't think they want to get rid of those faces.
America's funny guy at the party that you don't know, but he seems all right. Paul Rudd.
Yep.
The sheer economics of the whole like press junket thing, it's changed animated films as well, which I guess it kind of flips the point because essentially like now because of social media, all this like when they all go on the press junket, not only are they like, oh, I'm on Channel 5 News, they're on BuzzFeed, they're on, you know, freaking GQ, they're on all these things that people actually watch on YouTube as just like regular content. And that stuff is so important in the like engine of the marketing of these movies. So that's really what the actors are there for these days, in my opinion, is like not so much like there's times where people will be on the press tour and they're in all these goofy BuzzFeed videos where it's like, oh, we're with puppies or whatever. And I'm like, that person's in the movie for 5 seconds.
Yeah. It's like you have Secret Life of Pets where they did like, Kevin Hart, and that's a really big name, and they added like Kim Kardashian in it. And so you do get people to come listen to those voices, but it only goes so far. It's like, okay, but when you have Marvel and these faces, and who's going to be the face of Smart Water for the next 10 years? And then who's going to do that new Dior campaign that's worth billions of dollars that just keeps going? It's like it's the faces and then the products, the advertising, the marketing that comes after it. And it kind of stops when you have an animated.
It's true. It does stop when it's animated. That's a very good point.
You can't really meet Miles Morales.
Yeah.
Not really.
And that, but it is interesting how it is.
So it's an industrial complex. It's like a
machine.
Yeah.
But animated films didn't used to be like that, which I think is why it's an interesting case study, because animated films used to be you just get a voice actor.
Yeah, Katzenberg changed it.
Yeah.
With Shark's Tale.
Yes.
That was the first one.
That was the first one where it was like, here's everybody.
Yeah. People are like, why is Will Smith in a cartoon?
And why does he look like Will Smith?
Why does he look like Will Smith?
It's like Kevin Hart doesn't look like Kevin Hart in Secret Life of Pets, but Will Smith looks like Will Smith. And that's what made everyone love the movie.
And that's how they made money.
And I guess you like maybe Toy Story would be like.
And Shrek was the other one, by the way. Yeah.
I think, honestly, well, DreamWorks as a studio.
Ants, Shrek, yeah. But
they were the like corporate version of Pixar.
Dude, what if let's reboot it and call it Shreks?
Shreks.
And there's multiple.
Well, JC, as somebody who's an actual practicing actor, let me ask you, like, so we're at this point where, sure, it's hard to do faces still. 5 years from now, I don't think it's going to be hard to do faces. I think 5 years from now, it won't be hard to put any face you want in a movie, just straight up, whether it's close-up shots, wide shots, etc. Like, I mean, it'll be somewhat difficult. I don't think a kid with a computer could do it necessarily. But this idea of having something like, Robert Downey Jr. having his face and no one else has his face, that's going to stop being a thing where like anybody can have anybody's face, right? So JC, let me ask you, as an actress, if you were in roles where your full performance could come through, right? Or you're asked to be in a movie where full performance, full nuance, all that would come through, but it doesn't look like you and it doesn't sound like you. To what extent does that diminish, if at all, like your desire to do that role or that character?
I mean, that's interesting because there's so many levels. Because it's like you have like the Robert Downey Jr. where it's like his face, and then the robot is like, that's not really him. Really, he could be doing anything. And then there's also voice acting where I have full control over that emotion, but they never see me. But if you're super popular, they know that it's you, and they're like, oh, she's a really good voice actor.
Yeah, in this case, it'd be like you're a puppet master, effectively puppeting a fully detailed, fleshed out human that's indistinguishable from you.
There's a movie called Pacific Rim that,
or I mean,
would you be like, no thanks, or would you be like, it's whatever, it's just a character.
It's like if you're an avatar,
right?
But it's people instead of blue people. It's like you're freaking
you're Dean
Arnold. You're Arnold Schwarzenegger. You can everything in your face can control Arnold Schwarzenegger. Yeah. And your voice will change to be Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Yeah, it will change why you want to act. I think if like you're being someone else's persona, it's interesting because it's like you want to storytell and bring what you have to the table to present to the rest of the world. So it's like to go through someone else's face would be interesting because it doesn't give the same effect internally.
But there's like we have makeup. We have prosthetics that we do. It's interesting because it's a theoretical technology because I guess there's another question of could it ever be that good where it could actually pick up all the nuances of what your face is doing? Because
of course it can.
But it'll get there.
Is there something about like also the structure of your specific face that is part of the expressions you're making? You know what I mean? Like, does that expression change on another person's face?
So it's like I'm acting in the whole film, the Marriage Story, but it's Scarlett Johansson's face is what you're basically.
Yes, except let's assume it's not another actor or actress's face, but just a character that doesn't exist. Like they've invented a character
and
for
assume
the story.
It's perfectly interpolated so that there's no like loss, from your face to to the displayed face?
It's weird. It's definitely weird, but it's like it's just another job. You know, I think you can still bring your own emotions to the table, and it's like, and if you love being on set and you love making films, then you're gonna love doing that as well.
Mhm.
It's like sometimes you take the shitty jobs. It's obviously not going to be like the job that an actor who wants to be a superstar is going to want, but you're going to take it until you don't have to do those type of jobs anymore. And there are some people want to be that background actor, or like the stunt guys that never have their face shown.
Yeah.
You know, it's like those jobs will exist. Yeah.
But yeah, I think they'll be reserved for the big budget stuff.
Yeah.
Because like, you know, like Tarantino has something he says about, which I think is dumb, but he says like, to him, a movie, like if it's not captured, if not, like the vast majority of the thing is not captured in a camera of the real world, and he's like, it's not a movie, it's something else.
Mhm.
And I think
It's kind of an animation then.
Yeah. And I think that's really what we're talking about, is like kind of this new form of anime. But it's so, yeah, it's weird.
He gets triggered about filming with digital cameras though.
Yeah. But it's so limiting, I think, to go into this space where we're like, we're going to make CG films, but we're going to try to make them look like real life.
Mhm.
Whereas, isn't it so much more exciting if we just maintain that like we're always going to want to make real, quote, real movies in terms of like something shot through a camera, but this new emerging art form, like, I mean, it is at the end of the day animation. Like animation is changing. It's not really like filmmaking is changing in the traditional sense. It's that there's new forms of animation that you can make look like whatever you want because there's no limitations. Like the limitation used to be you could pretty much only do 2D cell shaded animation because that's cheap to produce and can be executed in like 2 years. But now with, you know, all the tools that are coming out, it's like you can make it look like whatever you want. So,
well, there was something that happened, and I think maybe the same thing is happening here now. But the thing that happened when we first started doing YouTube was everyone kept trying to define it in terms that they were already familiar with. I mean, remember this, Niko? It went on for years and now it's not a thing anymore. Now you just say, oh, you're a YouTuber or a creator or an influencer or whatever. There's many terms for it. But for a long time, everyone kept, we would have these conversations to be like, so you're making videos, okay? And then you're putting them on the internet, okay? And then people are watching those videos. Okay, so how long are they? You know, and what did you use to film them? Okay, do you like when from one to the next? Is there like some consistency or and we didn't have terms for it or anything. We were just making videos, and the same thing. We're kind of going through something similar now, where we're dealing with this. I mean, it's going to be a new thing. It'll be a new thing. Like it's is it animation? Sure, I guess. So maybe not. There's people who say it's not. I don't know. Does it matter?
I guess on some level, it's all kind of becoming the same thing. Because I've noticed this with films is like they're getting longer and longer. And I heard James Cameron talking about these new Avatar movies, and he's like, there's so much story I want to tell. And there's going to be like, maybe we can do a version that's on the streamers that's like 5 hours. And I'm like, okay, so now he's making a TV show, but now all the TV shows are starting to look like movies.
When did everyone start calling them streamers? Can we get that straightened out real quick? Because that's like the last 6 months.
Really?
It's always been streaming platforms, or
it was always streaming service, streaming platform.
Streamers.
Yeah,
streamers were people who streamed video games.
Yeah,
or any other thing online. But then the industry, like the traditional industry, started calling streaming platforms streamers.
I don't like that.
It's just confusing, is all, because there's two words now for there's one word for two separate things.
I'm an old man. I
anyways.
don't like change. I also don't like corporations like adopting like us internet, users.
That's
terms.
our word, streamer.
I guess I'm
Can't
an
take
old
that.
corporate guy.
But anyway,
Well,
sorry,
because
Dean,
you're
I
saying
didn't mean to
streamers would be
derail
like
that.
a guy who like live streams.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
on a Twitch
Oh, okay.
shirt.
Yeah.
The stuff they do.
Twitch or
when they game
anywhere
and
else.
stuff.
Typically gaming, but
Yeah.
Twitch even has gone beyond gaming now. And it's just
But
there's all
Netflix is a
kinds-
streaming
you
service.
want. There's some
Yeah.
weird. You can get into the weird-dums of the internet dumb when you go into streaming worlds. I mean, there's there's people who
It's
will
weird out
like.
there.
There's ASMR streams. There's game streams. There's, anyways.
But
Video game streams? Can you believe that? People watch people play video games on the internet?
and make a lot of money.
People
How are you
watch
doing
people
that?
watch things.
Hey, so unfortunately, ladies and gentlemen, I have to get heading home to have dinner. And
I
that
wasn't
means-
expecting. I thought
What do you got?
he was
What
about
do you
to
got? Like a
change the
family or
topic.
something, Nico? You got to
I
go
do.
take off.
Yeah,
Go
I
see
know.
your
believe it or
children
not.
and your wife. Come on.
God damn it.
We're
Yep.
streamers,
Yeah, the times
Nico.
have
We gotta do
changed,
that.
yeah.
We gotta do this at 4 a.m. That's the only way that it's really.
God, I always stream. If I'm not
Yeah.
streaming, I'm losing. That's
Dude,
the-
no, like sorry, I'm just gonna quick rant, 30 seconds.
Perfect.
Why is it that you have to live the like least healthy lifestyle possible to be a successful streamer? And why is that?
Well, it's because it's meant for teenagers and Gen Z. I
Is it though?
believe
Because there's plenty of people
I-
from our gen. Well, maybe
There
you're Gen
are
Z,
plenty
but there's plenty of
people,
millennials that do it too.
I think the mass majority, it's getting like you have to think about it. It's like when 6-year-olds weren't in our world, now they all are. It's like everyone has a phone and a tablet, and it's like it's becoming much younger, like them being a part of our world now. And so I think with everything, it's like how can we cater to the 17-year-olds and now it's like the 15-year-olds?
How can we keep them up until 4 a.m.?
Yeah, I'm gonna talk
Yeah.
shit about streamers. Tell my streamer friends out there, I'm just
Oh,
joking. but
dunk.
Maybe
Dunks,
Jake, the
guys.
answer is that if you became a streamer in the first place, your lifestyle health wasn't all that great to begin with.
There's something to be
Yeah.
said for that. Yeah.
Chicken before the egg.
All right,
kind
I'm
of
just
thing.
kidding. Kind of. What's up, Eli? I hope you're listening. All right. I have to bip. I have to
All
bop.
right.
We'll bip
Bippity
and bop
bop.
with you.
Bippity bop. Bippity boppity boo.
All right,
So long,
y'all.
everybody.
Well,
Thanks for listening.
Thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next one.
Get-a-doop-doop-doop.
All right.